Hello and welcome to this Triple COP business webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Eva Zabe and I'm the CEO of Business for Nature. We're a global coalition representing the leading business voice, advocating for policy ambition for nature. We're really pleased to be hosting this webinar together with the We Mean Business Coalition and Business for Land. And today's session, as hopefully you realize, is all about navigating a triple COP year when the three Rio conventions on climate, nature, and land will convene in close succession. To get going, we've just launched a poll, which you should be able to see in the Q&A tab. So please do go ahead and answer, and we'll share the results shortly. Now, I know that the COP processes can feel really complex or quite difficult to follow. And if that resonates, you are not alone. Our goal today is really to make this whole space more accessible, to provide a clear, practical overview of what's coming this year, and most importantly, how businesses can engage effectively. So why does all of this and why does this year matter so much? Well, because the three COPs are happening this year, they will influence the global response to three interconnected crises: biodiversity loss, climate change, and land degradation, which in turn require interconnected policy solutions. As you'll hear throughout this session, the focus across all COPs is now on implementation. You'll have heard, you know the global agreements like the Paris Agreement and the Global Biodiversity Framework. They're now being translated into real policy, finance, and accountability mechanisms. So you'll see the conversation is moving beyond long-term ambition toward the real-world actions that will shape how companies operate and compete today. We can expect that outcomes from the COPs will influence regulatory expectations and things like subsidy and incentives reform, carbon and nature markets, land use governance, financial flows, and more. And this brings me to a really important point, which is that a strong and coordinated business voice really makes a big difference. There's a big opportunity for companies to share their challenges, but also the solutions for tackling these interconnected crises. I'm sure that your company impacts or depends on things like energy, raw materials, freshwater, pollution, soil health, deforestation, pollination, oceans, erosion control, the list goes on and on. And so the actions that you are taking in your company are essential for the three conventions to make progress. They can't do it without business, without you. And so active business participation at the COPs provides governments with the courage and the comfort to set and implement ambitious policies. When a unified business voice shows up, it really does signal to policymakers that companies are prepared to invest, to innovate, to adapt alongside stronger policy frameworks. I wonder if anyone on the line on the call today was actually there in 2015 when businesses played such a critical role in securing the landmark Paris Agreement at the UNFCCC COP21. Or maybe you joined our collective effort in 2022 at the UN Biodiversity COP15, where governments adopted one of the most ambitious agreements, but also targets within the Global Biodiversity Framework, which is on business nature assessment and disclosure. At this point, as we kick off, we're warming up, I'd just like to take a step back and just acknowledge that these COPs are obviously taking place against a backdrop of geopolitical tension and conflict. And many people around the world are suffering right now, whether it's because they are directly involved, maybe they've lost loved ones, maybe indirectly due to issues of affordability, energy security, safety, and health. And so we send, of course, courage and strength in these difficult times. And we must remember that there is no nature positive, there's no net zero, there's no equitable world without a foundation of peace and trust. And with all their limitations, somehow these COPs that we're talking about today are also a space to put some differences aside, to build bridges, and to focus on agendas for our common future. They're a very precious and privileged moment to learn from and exchange with others, including Indigenous peoples, local communities, scientists, conservation organizations, and more. On a practical note, I know that the UN organizations are monitoring the situation carefully, given the geographic location of the COPs. But we can't afford to slow down or wait for perfect clarity. We really need to be agile and ready to show up, to contribute and help shape outcomes when these moments really happen. So what can you expect from today? Well, this webinar is designed to give you a clear overview of the triple COPs. We want to highlight key priorities and engagement opportunities, including how businesses can use their voice meaningfully and constructively. You're going to hear from representatives across the three conventions alongside business leaders who have engaged in COPs before to help make this as practical and actionable as possible. And we also did promise that this webinar would be jargon free. So this is a call out to all speakers to please remember that. And of course, to you, the audience, to hold us accountable for that. Ultimately, we really hope that you leave today feeling better equipped, more confident, and also hopefully inspired to engage, whether that's through advocacy, collaboration, or showing your leadership in your own organizations. So before we kick off the first panel, I'm just going to have a look at the slides, the poll. Let's have a look at the poll results, which are loading for me at the moment. So can we get the results, please? So we have, why are you joining this webinar? Mostly to get information. Great. Very politically correct of nobody to have selected the last one on getting local insights on best restaurants. But that's excellent that you're all here to either get the information or to know how you can actively contribute. Perfect. In terms of the second, what is the triple COP? Hooray. Oh, 3%. So maybe we have a new business model here about creating a new sports drink called the triple COP, triple effect. Here we go. And then the last one is, how are you going to engage? Excellent to see that over a third of you are going to attend one COP and maybe even a couple on the line, two COPs. The 50% of you that are going to be following from a distance, this is excellent because we also need to be aligned and engaged from the sidelines as well. So with that backdrop, I'm really excited to hand over to a great friend and former colleague, Carl Vella, who is the Climate Policy Director from our sister coalition, We Mean Business, and he'll be moderating a panel discussion with the UN secretariats. Over to you, Carl. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eva. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It's really great pleasure for me to be here representing the We in Business Coalition for this discussion on what many are calling this triple COP here. Just a couple of words about the We in Business Coalition. The coalition works with many of the world's leading businesses and partners to help accelerate the transition to a low-carbon, resilient economy. And we do this through practical policy engagement, business mobilization, and real economy action, including through the UN process, in particular the UN climate change process that we'll be looking into in a few minutes. Ahead of COP31 of the UNFCCC this year, our main priorities include representing business in terms of how to strengthen international cooperation and policy predictability. How do we accelerate the transition to a clean energy system via clean electrification, the enabling investment conditions to accelerate the transition, and also helping to transition climate ambition into practical implementation for business and delivery across the real economy. So why is this year unusual? Obviously, we know that there are these three conventions taking place within a few months of each other on climate, on biodiversity and land. And even though these processes, you could say, are distinct, they have their own conventions, the challenges they are trying to address are deeply interconnected, and the synergies across these conventions matter for business more and more. We see the decisions emerging from these COPs increasingly shape investment environments, policy frameworks, infrastructure planning, and in terms of the long-term market signals across the real economy. So these really matter for business. So we'll be having a great panel discussion with some fantastic speakers, where we'll try to dig deeper into helping business understand why these COP processes matter, in particular this year, as we said, because it is this triple COP year, what governments and the UN system are focused on this year. And in particular also, which is relevant for the audience we have today, is why business engagement can make a real difference in terms of the outcomes that we seek to achieve across these three conventions. So yeah, as I said, we're very lucky to be joined today by representatives from all the three Rio conventions, and perhaps that's enough from me. We should probably kick off. So let's start off with the UN climate process. And we're delighted to be joined by a good friend of mine, Ms. Kai Mercer, who is the Manager of Communications and Engagement at the UN Climate Change Secretariat. So Kai, the first question for you is, as Eva mentioned, we are living in times of significant geopolitical uncertainty, but also a growing recognition that climate, nature, and land, these challenges are deeply interconnected and require coordinated solutions, particularly also from a business perspective. So from the UN Climate Change Convention perspective, what do you see as the biggest opportunities to better align action across the three Rio conventions, and where can business play the most meaningful role in supporting implementation and accelerating progress?
Thank you, Carl, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. And I would like actually also to thank Women Business to organize this webinar, which is really very timely, as we will be actually starting next week's our subsidiary body sessions here in Bonn. And it is really my honor to be joining this panel with the CBD Executive Secretary, as well as with the UNCCD COP President. And maybe I can bring you a little bit back into more on the multilateral element, which is really important for the three COPs this year, as you're talking about this triple COP year. And I would like to highlight what is really on stake here. And it's not only a risk that we have in terms of weakening multilateralism, but it is about the scale and speed, which is really the opportunity here. And without coordinated global action, we can simply not manage the problem of this magnitude. In fact, without multilateralism, we would be on a pathway towards up to 5 degrees of global warming, something that no nation, no economy could survive. So that's how fundamental cooperation is to really bend this curve. And there is where the opportunity lies, because climate, nature, land challenges are inherently global, and cooperation is what really allows us to move from a fragmented world and fragmented efforts to a system-level transformation, protecting forests, restoring land, and accelerating clean energy. Only deliver their full value when they happen across borders. These are not isolated environmental actions, and they are economic foundations underpinning food systems, water security, supply chains, and much, much more. Second, there is a very real economic upside to cooperation. When countries align, we create larger and more predictable markets that drives down the cost of technologies like renewables and storage, accelerates innovation, and unlocks new industries. We are already seeing this. Clean energy is becoming one of the most competitive sectors globally, creating jobs, strengthening energy security, and reducing long-term costs. So if cooperation fragments, these opportunities don't disappear, but they become slower, more expensive, and more even and more unequal. If it holds, we get a faster, more efficient transition with much more shared gains. Third, on finance and trust, multilateralism is what enables capital to move at scale. It creates the confidence for investments to flow into emerging markets, into adaptation, and into need-based solutions. And that is critical because the real prize is aligning global capital with global public goods, building resilient infrastructure, sustainable food system, and restored ecosystems that support this really long-term growth that you were referring to. So in terms of what this means for the future of our economies, we are really choosing about these two models. One being this fragmented world that I was referring to with higher costs, disrupted supply chains, and increasing climate shocks that erodes stability. The other is the coordinated transition where cooperation enables scale, unlocking investment, accelerating innovation, and building economies that are more resilient, more efficient, and at the end also more competitive. And that's the key point. This is not about climate action as a constraint, but about climate and nature as a driver for the next generation and economic growth. Thank you, Carl. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Kai. I think, as you said, implementation, coordination, these themes are ones that I think we will come back to quite a few times during the discussion. I think it's reflective also what business wants to see increasingly coming out of the discussions. Much more focus on how do we implement the commitments that we already have. Very good. So let's turn on to the biodiversity agenda now. So I'm delighted to be joined today by Ms. Astrid Schumacher, the Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity. First question for you, Astrid, is that many businesses still see the COP process as complex, moving slowly, or perhaps distant from day-to-day realities of business. Why do you think these processes remain relevant for business today?
Well, thanks for the question. It's great to be with you. And let me join Kai for thanking you also to organize this conversation. It is an important one. And first of all, I think the premise of your question, 2/3 of it are correct. COPs are complex processes. They are difficult to understand, and they are often moving slowly and often moving too slowly, and finding it difficult to keep up with the challenges that we have to address, and that both Eva and Kai have been describing so well, so I don't have to repeat them. But why it matters for business to be a COPs, I think there are a number of reasons. And probably the most important one is, even though COP decisions are, of course, made by parties, so by countries, and countries commit to these decisions, countries then have to implement what they commit to. And that means regulatory change. It means planning processes that companies will be concerned by. It means the famous whole of society approach, so the push towards everybody to take action for companies to be good global stewards and to demonstrate that they're good global stewards, which is also then mirrored in the expectation of civil society. So companies that are good global stewards, that care about their environmental footprint, about how they impact biodiversity, are not only more resilient, because caring about biodiversity and caring about nature means having more stable business models, but they're also more likely to succeed in the sort of court of public opinion, and that's important to know. So when you're at a COP, it gives you kind of a preview where the journey is going. All the conventions, and specifically now the Biodiversity Convention, we have our big global frameworks. We have a roadmap for implementation, in our case, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and that now needs to be implemented. And it's a super important year for us because we do our first global stock take of the implementation of this framework and its 23 targets. We're right in the middle of it. So we will bring a global report telling us where we are, and the first draft is just out for peer review. And of course, we have seen unique action has been mobilized across all fields, including business action, including stepping up on the so-called means of implementation. In other words, more finance, more technology transfer, more capacity building, but not at scale and not broad enough. Now, what you can do at a COP beyond the negotiations and influencing negotiations potentially, it is also always a big marketplace of ideas and of actions. You find other companies, you find financing models, you can get inspired by how things are done elsewhere, you learn from each other. And these are very, very important opportunities for companies. And in that sense, and I think Eva has been describing that very well, these are unique opportunities for companies. In terms of negotiations, specifically, if I look at the Global Biodiversity Framework, and this year And if, as mentioned, there is a target that companies are particularly concerned about, it is about disclosure, not for the sake of disclosure, but as Kai has been describing, in order to understand how you interact with nature and what that means for your company, and then to change your business models to more nature positive ways. We will find that this is, and that's what our initial analysis shows, this is one of the targets that is lagging behind, where additional action is necessary. So companies really should be at the table in that discussion to understand what it means for them and to be able to feed in what is possible. And to also then hear from others like technology solution providers when they think monitoring is maybe difficult of a long supply chain at the end of the world. Yes, it may be difficult, but there are also increasingly interesting technological solutions. There's AI helping with forecasting, and there's a whole so-called ecosystem around it that can help a company do what it ought to be doing. So I maybe summarize it with in this very, very quick point, maybe just also to say in the broad investment, the climate convention has been much more successful, and maybe it's also a little bit easier to present climate change as an investment opportunity beyond the global challenge. But increasingly, and also with the help of science and the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, there is a clear case that also investing in nature brings significant benefits and returns. We need to work more on the de-risking and on the understanding of these opportunities. But again, this broader discussion can happen at the COPs, at our COP, but also at the climate COP when we look at nature-based solutions for mitigation and adaptation. It's important to be there. Then my last point, a triple COP year is not that unusual. It happens every 2 years, basically. But what we haven't been able to do, and what is again very relevant for business, and I close on that, is to leverage this fact that the 3 COPs are taking place in quick succession. So from a business perspective, the fact that 3 COPs call for alignment with slightly different agendas, which ultimately want to achieve the same, is complicated. So it is important that also business pushes the COPs, the parties, and the secretariats to greater cooperation, to making things simpler, to looking at how reporting can be brought together, how planning processes can be brought together early on, not as an afterthought, how indicators can be more aligned, and therefore how businesses can receive a clearer message that is easier to implement.
Thank you so much, Astrid. And actually, I think your points on sort of this is exactly in line with sort of the rationale and the spirit of why we wanted to bring these webinars today. Also like the idea of, as you said, companies acting not only as actors in the economy, but also as stewards of the system, and really having a role to play in terms of how we shape the system. So yeah, naturally, I think this now brings us to our third speaker and the land agenda, where we also see climate, biodiversity, aspects related to agriculture, water, livelihoods, all intersecting very directly. So let's turn to the UN CCD process now, and we're delighted to be joined by Dr. Osama Farkiha, who is the president of UNCCD COP16, which is the largest UNCCD COP that we've seen till now. Really great to have you with us, Dr. Osama. The question for you today is, as we see land sitting at the intersection of climate action and biodiversity protection, these issues are still often discussed separately. Why is it so important that we strengthen the connections across land, climate, and biodiversity agendas?
Well, thank you, Carl, and I'd like to thank also Eva and others who organized this Triple Cup webinars. And also hello to Astrid. I'm very glad to see Astrid, a dear colleague. We worked on several issues from G20, and also thanks for Kay. I guess as mentioned by Astrid and Kay, I mean, the process is separate. We know that every convention has a history and it has emerged. Separately, it has its own formalities, and we know UNFCCC went through Kyoto Protocol, then the Paris Agreement, and then we are going into the Montreal Common framework, and we have the land degradation authority under the UNCCD. But actually, as mentioned by my colleagues, the nature is not connected. It is connected. It is not separated. Land, the ocean, and the climate and biodiversity are all connected. The forest exists on land. The rivers, the lakes are on land. The fresh waters are on land. Our food is cultivated on land. 95% of our food comes from land. So the amount of carbon stored in soil and vegetation cover 3 times the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. So the linkages naturally are there, but the processes now are separate. So I think now recognizing the natural connection between those and what we do in land impacts biodiversity, impact climate. When we cultivate land and reclaim land for agriculture, we impact biodiversity and we impact our land capacity to store carbon. And this is happening now. 60% of biodiversity loss is linked to loss of habitats. And this is very much linked to deforestation, which is strongly linked to how we deal with agricultural land and how we really grow our food. So it is interconnected. How we build our roads impact land, and also how we build our cities, mining, building materials, agriculture, fashion industry, how we produce our energy, all are impacting our environmental footprint. So it is interconnected. I strongly agree with Kay and Astrid that the business community need to continue to be strongly involved in all the 3 conventions, because if you involve, it is all interconnected. Nature-based solutions will take place mostly on land. And what we do in nature-based solution will not only really impact our ability to store carbon, but if we do it properly, we can win on the biodiversity issue as well, how we will store, and then we can win also in land neutrality and land management. Again, it is in the best interest of the business to be engaged, because the long-term sustainability of business depends on how we do, how we treat our climate, carbon footprint, or how we deal with biodiversity and how we deal with land neutrality. 60% of degraded lands are agricultural lands. We lose 12 million hectares per year of forest because of reclamation of forest to agriculture. And it is done by businesses. So I believe that it is in the best interest of the business to be engaged in this dialogue, to influence policymakers. Again, the opportunity is in implementation. I think synergies in implementation. If we implement the projects right, we will win in land, we will win in climate resilience, and we will win in biodiversity. And the opposite is happening. If we start to fragment our implementation, fragment our plans, fragment our financial flows, we will lose on all of them. And I would like to echo what Kay mentioned about the multilateralism. By working together, we all win, and by fragmentation, the consequences are dire on climate, on biodiversity, on land. We have no other option but to work together, because these challenges are global and they are impacting businesses and communities and nature as well. And we have no other path but working together. I know sometimes it's frustrating. I know that the negotiations are difficult. I know there is some competing priorities. I know there is some varying national circumstances. But despite the difficult process, this is the only process available. And there is a huge opportunity for the business to really cultivate and build onto these by creating synergies on the implementation. I think we need synergies in implementation. We need synergies in financial flows. Again, we need to restore 1.5 billion hectares to reach land degradation neutrality. And we need $2 trillion to do that by 2030. And now all these are huge, and vast amount of money that is not available. But from now until 2030, we will be spending around $40 trillion in harmful subsidies, according to UNEP. We are spending $7 trillion in harmful subsidies. So I think by really adjusting our policies, by incentivizing climate resilient, nature positive, sustainable land management practices, I don't think we need to allocate more money. I think we need to really appropriate the current spending more wisely, more synergetically, push for integration. I think I agree with Astrid into the reporting as well. We need to enhance the reporting to make it more integrated for all the conventions, both easier for the businesses and easier for governments. I believe synergetic and
Dr. Osama?
integrated planning is the only way to go forward.
I'm very sorry to interrupt. It's just that we have quite a few speakers, and I just wanted to come in with one final question for our three speakers. But thank you so much for that fantastic intervention. I think it's a fantastic and very important reminder that the climate and nature solutions that we talk about ultimately do depend on resilient and healthy land systems. But I do want to close off this panel discussion with a very quick question to our three speakers, and I'd like you to maybe reflect and just give a very quick reply in a very few words. So before closing the panel, I just wanted to ask, sort of, as we're talking about this 2026 as the triple COP year, what would be one concrete, one tangible signal that will show you that the business community, that companies have stepped up in a meaningful and impactful way across the three COP processes? And with this, perhaps I can go first to Kai, and then we'll go to Astrid, and then we'll go to Dr. Osama. So just in a very, very few seconds, because then we need to go on to the business speakers. Thank you. Let's go to Kai.
Thank you, Carl. Very difficult question to be very succinct here. I think the main point here is really coordination, and it's also the CCD COP president has indicated these processes. The three processes are different, and we have different indicators. We have different political nature and dynamics. But the good thing is that businesses are actually much more freer to really bring the energy and help us to connect these synergies that are so much needed, as our other panelists have said. So maybe I stop here and pass on back to you.
Fantastic. Let's go straight to Astrid.
I think a very tangible sign would be the willingness of business to engage in difficult discussions as well. And I want to pick up exactly where Dr. Osama left us with this reflection on subsidies. So that discrepancy we have on nature negative spending to nature positive spending, a factor of 30 to 1. Every $1 invested in pro-nature activities offset with $30 invested either through subsidies or company activities in activities that destroy nature. That means the issue of subsidy reform becomes central, and business has to be at the table there and be part of that discussion, so that it becomes clear that subsidy reform is not about putting business out of business, but about making business more sustainable, and as Dr. Osama has said, in its own interest. So for the viability of the business models and their long-term economic success, and therefore also the long-term success of mankind on this planet. Thank you.
Couldn't agree with you more, Astrid. Thank you for that. And Dr. Osama, from your side?
I think really a substantial number of business leaders, especially the Fortune 500 companies and those major global companies, if they come with integrated sustainability plans that include climate resilience, nature positive, and sustainable land management plans, all integrated into their sustainability plans, I think that will be a clear sign that we are achieving integration at the implementation level and with the business community.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to our three speakers for this really great discussion. I hope this has helped demonstrate and clarify to our audience not only why these COPs are important for governments, but also why business engagement matters and why there is an opportunity to engage for business, particularly at this moment when we talk about implementation, investment, and delivery as being critical and central to all the three agendas. So with that, thank you all to all our speakers. I'm going to hand back to Eva to guide us into the next segment of this webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Carl, and thank you so much to the three amazing panelists representing the secretariats of the UNCBD, UNFCCC, and the presidency of the UNCCD. And also I should say the UNCCD COP16 presidency was one that really pushed, thanks to Dr. Osama's leadership, a decision on synergies, and it's really an honor to have you with us. So sincere thanks and gratitude to you. I had a number of takeaways from this conversation that I thought was really helpful, but one just to stand out and maybe not take for granted is that the language of the conversation that you've just witnessed just shows how much more fluent we are all talking about the challenges, the policies, the business action. There's more fluency in terms of using business language, questions like, what are the operational and supply chain risks? Where's the investment opportunity? We talk about AI, about finance. And I think that from the business side, there's also an increase in understanding and fluency of these political processes. So yes, Astrid, while it's true the triple COPs happen every 2 years, it's the first time that we're organizing a webinar like this in a coordinated way. So anyway, thank you so much, really insightful. And on the slide now, there's a quick summary of the key information across the COPs this year. I'm not going to go into the detail. You will see it. You're getting the slides in the recording afterwards. But there you see the key COP themes, the priority topics for governments, and how business can really act and lend their voice. So you'll get the slide, don't worry. I'm going to now transition to the next part of this webinar, which is really to hear from our business speakers to tell about what's top of their mind for each of these COPs and how they're going to engage. So to start with, it's a real pleasure to introduce Julie Green, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer at Olam Agri, to talk about the UNCCD lens. So over to you on the desertification COP17. Thanks so much, Julie. And can you go off mute, please? Thank you.
There we go. Okay, thanks. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be speaking on behalf of Business for Land and as a member of the Business for Land Champions Council. The council is a coalition of private sector leaders. We're committed to putting land at the center of business and of investment decisions. As businesses, we're often talking about supply chains and energy and resilience. I want to bring us back to something really fundamental, which is, of course, land. The land under our feet literally underpins business, from consumer goods to infrastructure to agriculture. It's underpinning food production, raw materials, energy systems. It regulates water cycles and carbon storage, climate stability. It supports livelihoods and markets and social stability. So if your company depends on any of these, then land is already important to your business strategy. As we know, we've heard a lot of numbers earlier already. A third of land is already degraded, and we're losing millions of hectares more a year. For us at Olam Agri, our business touches food, fashion, biofuels, industrial infrastructure, rural infrastructure. We know that land is a critical factor for our business resilience. So that's why we're using advanced tools to monitor our land footprint and impacts from Brazil to Nigeria to Australia. That's why we invest in regenerative agriculture across cotton and rice and sugar value chains. And that's why we're part of Business for Land. And that's what I really want to speak with you about. So Business for Land is the UNCCD's main private engagement mechanism. It was created to help companies move from interest to action, and to provide a platform for businesses to engage with the land agenda in practical ways and to contribute to outcomes ahead of the COP17 that's coming up, of course, in Mongolia this August. Business for Land works through 3 practical levers. One of them is providing practical guidance for companies to understand, to assess, to manage their land-related dependencies, risks, and opportunities. So Business for Land, to do this, is working with partners like the Global Reporting Initiative and the Science-Based Target Networks to be able to provide this guidance to align corporate disclosures and target setting with land positive and drought resilient outcomes. Second, Business for Land creates a bridge between business and policy. It supports dialogue and with the UNCCD's 197 parties to ensure that private sector perspectives can inform policy and that these policies are practical, they're scalable, and they're investable. So ahead of COP17, Business for Land has invited the WBCSD, World Business Council for Sustainable Development, to engage with its member companies to shape business-driven recommendations on land resilience and on agriculture. So this provides an opportunity not just to respond to policy, but actually to shape it. And it's a real invitation to you to join in this conversation as well. And third, Business for Land works to unlock investment in sustainable land management and really to help businesses that are trying to tackle these questions of scale and finance and innovation. This includes initiatives like the DRIF, that's the Drought Resilience Investment Facility, which is working to mobilize private sector investment, as well as pilots of innovative insurance solutions in drought-prone regions. So finally, what can you do as businesses? So I've got 3 calls for action for you. First, engage with Business for Land. Join the B4L community. This means becoming part of our growing coalition, which is committed to advancing land restoration and drought resilience and sustainable land management. And it also provides access to practical opportunities to engage ahead of COP17, which brings me to number 2. Engage with COP17. This is really an important moment for businesses who want to help shape the future of the land agenda. You don't need to be a policy expert. Business for Land will help you to navigate opportunities, to join discussions, to connect with policymakers, to connect with peers, to engage meaningfully ahead of COP17 and during COP17. And third, bring land into your business conversations with your CFO, with your procurement head, with your investors. Ask those practical questions like, where are land-related risks emerging in your value chains? How are drought and degradation affecting resilience? And what investments today could strengthen your long-term stability tomorrow? These are key questions because your stability, resilience, all of these are also your competitiveness in the long term. And companies that understand this connection between climate, nature, and land will be better positioned for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Really insightful. Thank you. And we're now going to move swiftly on to the next COP in our year of the triple COP year, which is the biodiversity COP17. This is the one that Business for Nature is really leading on, and I am absolutely delighted to introduce Tim Christopherson, who's the Vice President of Climate Action at Salesforce. Tim is an absolute superstar. He's written an amazing book. Tim, this is not the time to talk about your book, but you can put a link in if you want. This is the time to talk about why this COP matters. Thanks so much, Tim. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Eva. And first of all, congratulations on this Synergies webinar across the 3 Rio conventions. I'm on the BFN advisory group, and I'm also, I think that's why you asked me, a former CBD COP organizer. I was part of the CBD COP secretariat and helped to organize the COPs in Bonn, Nagoya, and Hyderabad. So ideally, we would, as business representatives, attend all 3 COPs, but even more ideally, we would only have to go to one COP, one super COP that discusses all these very relevant issues to business in one setting. And there's, of course, a precedence with the Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm Convention, who've managed that successfully to merge. So maybe in 2030. So why CBD COP at Salesforce, what we've done over the past few years since I joined the company 4 years ago is to launch a nature positive strategy. We have invested heavily in nature-based solutions through the voluntary carbon market, for example, but also through our water program and our commitment to plant and restore 100 million trees. We see nature as a business resilience issue, and I think that has more and more spread across the business community. So biodiversity matters clearly to a lot of businesses. Why in Armenia this October in particular? It's a big COP. So for the first time, countries will review progress since agreeing to the Global Biodiversity Framework. And it's 23 targets. Governments will take stock there, what's on track, what's not, and agree on actions to speed up progress. And they will also aim to increase the finance that is needed to protect and restore nature. A key part of that is the Kali Fund. It's a new mechanism with a specific purpose to focus on genetic data, so DNA information from plants, animals, or microbes, highly relevant, for example, for the pharmaceutical industry and others, and how the benefits from that DNA from biodiversity can go back to the countries where those resources come from. COP is also the half point of the UN decade on ecosystem restoration. That decade brings all the 3 COPs together, but the half point celebration will be at CBD COP in Armenia. So decisions at that COP will directly influence businesses in a number of ways. For example, through how markets will evolve, that agreement on DNA from biodiversity and its genetic use. Its use also in digital form. And what is at stake and the opportunities for businesses to engage. We have at this year Business for Nature focusing on these core themes. We have reforming government-led fiscal and financial incentives. Let's remember that nature negative spending, including government spending, still outpaces nature positive spending by a factor of 30 to 1. We look at this year's UNEP State of Finance for Nature report. So we have to clearly shift that around. And the core topic of reforming government-led fiscal and financial incentives is relevant to all businesses that have any connection with nature. And that is, of course, all of us, as we all depend on functioning and healthy ecosystems. The second topic is the Kali Fund, where I'll be focusing as the Business for Nature group also on working with business to show governments that we have a collective willingness to support benefit sharing. If you're specifically interested in that topic, I think Lizzie has a form that can be shared for expressions of interest. So meaningful engagement what does that look like? If you can come in person, that's of course preferred, but there's also ways to prepare and then absorb information as it comes. I was really happy about the in-person business meetings we had in Montreal and in Cali that were organized around all the businesses that were there. It was really impressive at both COPs how many businesses were there. I think Montreal, the CBD COP in 2022 was really a game changer in how many businesses actually go to the COPs or to the biodiversity COP specifically. Of course, for governments to see that business has growing momentum on biodiversity, developing a nature strategy is really helpful, demonstrating credible real-world action on nature, and engaging constructively with your governments to highlight need for ambitious policies and provide suggestions for practical and effective implementation. So sending clear signals that businesses want clear rules and a level playing field is, I think, in the interest of all of us. So I hope many of us can attend CBD COP 17 in person. Even if you can't attend, monitor negotiations, signal support for the Business for Nature policy positions, and follow the BFN Nature's post-COP information. So I hope that many of us will be able to go. It's not a very easy location this year, but as Eva already said, there's some WhatsApp group and other support groups to help even with that. So thank you very much, and back over to you, Eva.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you. We're really looking forward to it and appreciate all of your contributions over the years. And maybe if everyone else had like that diversified background, then we'd all be talking the same language and we'd also be able to make progress faster. But thanks so much again. And last but definitely not least, we're moving to the climate COP31, and it's my real pleasure to introduce Gonzalo Sáenz de Miera, Director of Climate Change and Alliances at Iberdrola. So Gonzalo, over to you to tell us, and also really cool that Kay earlier was saying that the UN Triple C, what am I saying? The UN Triple C, the Climate COP 31, UNFCCC, is going to be taking on board and welcoming the feedback from the other two COPs that take place. So thank you so much again for being with us. Over to you, Gonzalo.
Okay, thank you very much, Eva, and thank you for inviting us to this extremely interesting webinar. On behalf of the Women Business Coalition, let me share with you 3 ideas on why COP31 on climate change is critical and why business participation is more important than ever. First, we are in a very complex global context. So where climate change continues to accelerate and remains the medium-term main threat to the global economy, where at the same time we are facing recurrent energy crisis. So society and politicians are understanding that we have to move from fossil fuels to renewables, not just for nature, but for economic competitiveness and energy security, and to take advantage of all these industrial opportunities, where we are also see a shift in priorities. There is a growing weight given to economic competitiveness and, above all, energy security. And in some cases, these concerns are gaining prominence over climate change. And where, however, there are still clear signs of leadership. So the European Union, while adapting its policies, keeps climate change at the core. China continues to show an amazing industrial leadership in clean technologies. And countries like the UK or Brazil are playing a really important role. The second question is that electrification is at the center of climate action. So both the Turkish presidency and Australia have made it clear electrification is the top priority of this COP. And why? Because electrification is extremely supported by its advantages in terms of energy security, that today is the main concern, and because it's increasing competitiveness and cost efficiency, especially compared with the decarbonization of molecules. However, in electrification, we are seeing technological progress at the frontier, but the deployment is not advancing at the pace required, especially, for instance, in Europe or even in the United States. So there are several key issues being discussed and that will be discussed at COP31. First is the need for a global electrification target. So I'm sure you know that a lot of people are working with ambitions around 30% for 2035 and more than 50% for 2050. The other thing is the fiscal and regulatory policies, particularly regarding the prices, the relative prices between gas and electricity, that today are competing to comply with the energy demands. Networks are going to be a really important issue at COP. And above all, I will say that there is the need for this COP to advance in implementation. A COP where we see a movement from ambition to action. So let's move to the third point. Business leadership at COP is going to be really important. This is going to be a COP of implementation. Then business leadership will be decisive. At Iberdrola, we will be fully engaged at COP31, supporting the process at a crucial moment with a clear focus on implementation and on building robust multi-stake alliances. We really believe in alliances, and we will do that with a strong alliance, and specifically with the Women Business Coalition that for us represents the leading global business alliance on climate change. And with them, we are working on a global business alliance on electrification that we think is going to be a really, really powerful initiative, and a strong program on actions to advance it, including the development of a business manifesto for electrification. And let me say something. We have attended more than 15 COPs. And for me, COPs are unique fora, are the best fora for networking with purpose, with business purpose as well. So at COP31, we will be actively engaging, holding meetings with key countries and stakeholders, driving initiatives and alliance to decarbonize industries, to decarbonize buildings, to decarbonize transport, and importantly, creating opportunities for dialogue, for policymakers, for collaboration with other companies, and engagement with think tanks. So
Thank you.
Let me conclude
so
saying that, okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Gonzalo, so much. Thank you for your really clear presentation. Thanks for mentioning the policy signals, the price signals, and also just even your commitment. So really appreciate it. And sorry to have to need to move on the agenda. We have one final amazing speaker as we go. So I did want to make sure that we give enough time. This slide on right now just recaps the business engagement opportunities across the three COPs, whether you're attending in person or virtually. So we will also be sharing this, and it aligns very much with what you've just heard. So moving on, before we close, we wanted to take a bit of a step back and hear from a most fantastic business leader who's really an inspiration, personally to me as well. It's really an honor for me to introduce Adrien Guéguer, who's the CEO of L'Occitane en Provence, for some closing remarks. Over to you, Adrien, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Eva. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, really, thank you all. Thank you for an hour that really earned its place. So yeah, I'm the last voice, so I will try not to repeat what has already been said today. Well, you have heard that business needs to speak with one voice. We do. But a voice only counts if it points somewhere. So let me tell you where I think, what I think our voice as business has to point. And I think Bianca mentioned it really well at the beginning. For me, it's the incentives. And here's why I keep landing on that word. At L'Occitane, almost 90% of what goes into our products comes from plants. And so for us, nature is the supply chain. And I think really Alexandre told us really well, huh? Almost everything we sell starts as something grown in soil somewhere, which raises a blunt question, and especially for us as a family business. Do we still have a company in 20 years? Because no living soils means no sourcing, no innovation, and really no business. So really, and I think now it's clear for everyone, nature sits at the top of the chain and everything we make hangs off it. So that is why really also I do now run the company today instead of running sustainability. In fact, I did held the CSO title and I left. And when sustainability or nature, and I saw it, when it lives in its own department, it spends its days asking for to the rest of the businesses for budget. And to be honest, it loses that argument almost every single time. So this is why we stopped giving it a department, and the whole company is the department right now. And what actually moves nature is not a pledge, really it's an incentives. Because really at the end of the day, what good companies do well, and it's really as simple as that, is to reach KPIs. And it's to reach KPIs because then like employees get their bonuses. And that's what, as company, as business, that's what we do well. So let me be concrete. I hope most of you know our shea butter hand cream made with 20% shea butter. For more than 30 years, we have bought our shea straight from women's cooperative in Burkina Faso. Fair trade certified since 2009. There they call it women's gold. We have long contracts, the price agreed before the season, the money paid upfront, and a premium paid for one thing only, keeping the shea tree standing. And actually, we did none of that just out of generosity, because the guaranteed price changes what a woman can count on and what she protects. And today, 3 in 4 of those women send their children to school. And together they have brought back the tree sparks the savannah was losing. So we made it pay to keep the land alive, and the land came back. And this is good business. And what worked on a few thousand hectares, now look at the scale we can actually have to shift. Because today, for every dollar that the world is spent on protecting nature, it spends $30 destroying it. And that is the wall. That is the wall every one of us on this call keeps working onto it. And no message, no amount of unified message gets you through a wall that the public money is busy building. So for me, the test I'll be watching when I will see the 3 cups is whether a single dollar of that money starts to move. The day it pays more to keep an hectare alive than to clear it. The day the investors funds it without being asked. The day the buyer demands it. The day the finance ministers pulled in thousands of directions stops feeling nature under later. And for me, this is where our one voice has to point. Get the incentives right. And this is when the voice takes care of itself. Thank you. Eva, mic is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Look at all those virtual claps. Adriel, I love that. I think you all did. Yes to having the right incentives. I love that nature is your supply chain. And by the way, nature is also your best business partner. So we're at the end of the webinar. I just really hope that all of you found it helpful, valuable. We'd really, all of us, Business for Land, Business for Nature, Women Business Coalition, we're all absolutely glad to continue this conversation. Just so you know, Business for Nature will be hosting a second webinar in September, specifically on the biodiversity COP17, to further help businesses in their preparation. So please keep an eye out. And simply, I'd just like a big round of applause. Thank you so much for your time, to all the amazing speakers, and let's really make a difference together. Thank you again. Bye, everyone.